In Florida, a town disappeared without a storm, a flood, or a war. In January 1923, Rosewood, a small, mostly black community in Levy County, was broken apart after a white woman in nearby Sumner claimed she had been attacked. The claim was never proven, yet armed search groups entered Rosewood, homes were burned, families fled, and several people died. The records show the violence. They also leave a harder question: why did no power in Florida stop it? Rosewood was not a ghost town before the violence. Families lived there, worked there, raised children there, and built a life tied to the land. It had homes, churches, and the daily trust of people who knew one another. Sumner was close by, but the two places did not stand on equal ground. Race shaped who was believed, who could carry a weapon, and who could expect protection from the law. The first spark came from an accusation in Sumner. A white woman said that a black man had attacked her. That claim moved through the area before proof could catch up. The suspect was sought, but the case did not rest on a clear finding in court. In a place ruled by fear and racial power, an unproven story became enough to call armed men into the countryside. Levy County Sheriff Robert Elias Walker stood at the center of the public response. His office had the duty to protect people in the county, including the residents of Rosewood. But the violence spread through search parties while black families faced a threat that official force did not fully stop. The records do not turn every act into a simple story of one man's choices, but they show a law system that failed when protection mattered most. Search groups moved through Rosewood looking for the accused man. Their purpose, as claimed at the time, was to find a suspect. The effect was wider. Black residents were treated as targets because of a rumor tied to one accusation. Homes were entered, families were forced to hide or run, and the town became unsafe for the people who had made it their home. For the families inside Rosewood, escape was not a clean choice. Leaving meant abandoning houses, land, tools, clothing, and the proof of a life built over years. Staying meant risking capture by armed men whose search had already crossed from law into mob action. Some people hid. Some fled through the woods. Some were helped away by people who understood that silence could be the price of survival. The exact death toll remains disputed. Several people died, but the surviving records do not settle every detail. That uncertainty is not a reason to doubt the violence. It shows how quickly a community can lose control of its own story when witnesses are threatened, records are thin, and officials fail to create a full account. The missing numbers became part of the wound. The physical evidence was harder to erase. Homes burned, families scattered, Rosewood's buildings and shared spaces were destroyed, and returning became dangerous. A town can vanish from a map in one way, and from memory in another. The first loss came through fire and flight. The second came when the people who survived learned that speaking about Rosewood could bring shame, danger, or disbelief. Local newspapers carried reports of the crisis, while court records and state files preserved parts of the official response. Survivor testimony kept other parts alive. These sources do not speak with one voice, and they do not answer every question, but together they show a clear pattern. The accusation was unproven, the violence reached Rosewood, law enforcement failed to protect its residents, and the community did not return as a living town. The search for a suspect also hid a change in the meaning of the event. At the start, the public story centered on one alleged attack in Sumner. Soon, the danger fell on an entire black community in Rosewood. That shift mattered. It turned one unproven claim into a test of who counted as safe, who counted as guilty, and whose home could be destroyed without a strong response from the state. Sheriff Robert Elias Walker's role remains part of that record. He was the county officer expected to keep order, yet Rosewood residents were left exposed as armed groups moved through the area. It is important not to claim more than the evidence shows. The surviving account does not prove every rumor about his actions. It does show institutional failure because protection was required, and protection did not reach the people under attack. Florida's local power structure made the danger worse. In January 1923, a black family could not depend on equal treatment from every white neighbor, newspaper, court, or officer. The legal promise of protection existed on paper, but power was carried by people in the field. When armed groups acted on a claim that had not been proven, the gap between law and life became deadly. Rosewood survivors carried the town into private memory. Many stayed silent for decades. That silence should not be read as proof that the event was small or forgotten by the people who lived through it. Silence can be a shield. Families may avoid painful stories to protect children, preserve jobs, or escape the danger that follows those who challenge a powerful public story. The community's disappearance also created a record problem. When homes are gone, property is scattered, and residents move away. Later, investigators must work through fragments. A newspaper may capture a moment. A court file may reveal what officials chose to record. A survivor may remember what no office wrote down. Each source has limits, but the limits do not cancel one another. They show how the truth of Rosewood survived in pieces. For decades, Rosewood was pushed to the edge of Florida's public memory. The town did not simply vanish because people moved. It vanished because violence made return unsafe, because the physical place was destroyed, and because the wider system did not force a full public reckoning. The silence was not empty. It carried fear from one generation to the next. Later research and survivor accounts brought the case back into view. The new attention did not restore the homes or return the lost years. It did something smaller but still important. It placed Rosewood inside Florida's recorded history instead of leaving it only in family memory. The process also exposed how long official recognition can take after a state has failed its own citizens. In 1994, the Florida legislature passed a compensation law for Rosewood survivors. The law marked a change in public memory. Florida was no longer treating the destruction of the community as a private story that families had to carry alone. Compensation gave legal recognition to harm that had gone without a timely remedy. But payment could not rebuild Rosewood, replace lost land, or recover records and lives shaped by exile. That limit matters. A law can name an injury many years after it happened, but it cannot make the danger disappear from the past. The survivors had already grown old. Their families had already built lives elsewhere. The town's absence had already become normal to people who never asked why it was gone. Official repair arrived, but it arrived after the community itself had been lost. So why did Florida's Rosewood vanish in 1923? Not because the accusation was proven. It was not. Rosewood vanished because an unproven claim gained force through racial fear, armed action, and the failure of local protection. Homes were burned, families fled, and the path back was closed by danger and loss. The deepest mystery is not how a town disappeared. It is how long the state allowed that disappearance to remain unspoken. Rosewood now stands as a warning written into Florida's landscape and records. A community can be erased without every document being destroyed. It can be buried under silence, disputed numbers, lost property, and the simple passage of time. The evidence still points to the same human truth. Rosewood was a real place. Its families were real, and their suffering did not become less real because justice came late.